good morning and welcome to Venture Church Online. My name is Tash and together with Simon, we co-lead Venture Church. Today we're not meeting at the Beaconsfield School because a number of us are at New Wine. But if you are one of the ones that weren't able to make it with us there, we hope that you're able to gather with other believers today and really celebrate the Lord's Day. Today, Simon has some reflections from Matthew 11 around what it means for us to find rest. And so hopefully this will be really helpful for you. In a moment, I'm going to give you a chance to reflect upon that. But before we do, let me just share with you a couple of things coming up in the life of our church. Firstly, next Sunday we'll be back at the Beaconsfield School and we'll be there over the month of August and September, meeting every Sunday. In October, we will officially relaunch our venture communities. But in the summer, things will look a little bit different. We'll have creche at the back of the hall. The kids program will be a little bit more relaxed, and we have some wonderful guest speakers from within our church and from without our church who will be blessing us in that time. So we do look forward to gathering then and catching up with you all. Otherwise, why don't you just take a moment just to take a breath and meditate upon these words from Matthew 11.
Hello Venture Church, and I hope you are having a great day. Today I want us to have a little bit of a think about the biblical concept of rest. We all know that we need rest. Lifestyle magazines are full of articles encouraging their stressed out readers to listen to their bodies and get some rest. But interestingly enough, it's only fairly recently that scientists have discovered why rest is so important. A few years ago, a group of scientists discovered how it is that our brains actually physically clean themselves out during rest. That just as our bodies and cells accumulate toxic waste as they work, requiring the lymphatic system to wash this waste away, so too our brains also need cleaning, but they need a different cleaning system. The clear liquid called cerebrospinal fluid that covers our brains travels through special channels, and one of its functions is to physically wash the brain out, taking the toxins into the general circulatory system where the liver can remove them. And studies show that this special cleaning system within our brain is 10 times more active during rest and sleep. When we're active, these channels squeeze shut and the cerebrospinal fluid hangs out mostly on the surface of the brain, not deep inside it, meaning that this cleaning system can only perform at 5% of its capacity. So it's only when we actually take the time to get some rest that these channels open up and our brains can switch into cleaning mode using cerebrospinal fluid. And if these toxins are not cleaned away from our brains, it invites all kinds of nasties into play. Our brains struggle to perform well and we start hallucinating, going crazy if we go for too long without rest. So rest is good, and science, it seems, can now tell us why. Jesus also spoke on the subject of rest, but not just physical rest. Jesus spoke to the need for an equally important, if not more profound type of rest: soul rest, rest for the soul. In Matthew chapter 11, we have recorded these amazing words of Jesus. "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Come unto me, says Jesus, and I will give you rest. Here in this precious promise, we have two things standing in contrast to each other: a burden and a rest. And if I was to ask each one of you this morning, which of these two states of being do you identify most with right now, what would you say? Rest or burden? Which do you feel most in the very core of your being? Rested or burdened? The word burden that Jesus uses here means a load carried or toil borne to the point of exhaustion. Rest then is simply release from this exhaustion, this burden that exhausts. Now, obviously, the concept of burden is something that those listening to Jesus could relate to. Many of them were agricultural workers, and that's tough, especially in the first century, and especially under the political oppression of the Roman Empire. These guys know what it is to be burdened, but Jesus is speaking here of a burden borne by the whole human race, which means that this is more than just economic oppression or political oppression, as oppressive as those things can be. This is something more than hard work, something more than poverty. In other words, it's something that can be felt by the rich as well as the poor, something from which neither immense wealth or opportunity or endless holidays can deliver us. Because if the rest that Jesus promises here simply means the end of hard work and the beginning of lots and lots of leisure time, then the Apostle Paul was really a terrible Christian example. But no, it's much deeper than this. A.W. Tozer argues that what Jesus is speaking of here is the burden of self-love and pride, the burden of trying to prove or establish our sense of self, our name, our reputation in the world. In other words, Jesus is speaking of the burdensome and relentless task of having to create or manufacture our own sense of identity, self-worth, and significance. Tozer writes, "The burden of pride and self-love is a heavy one indeed. Think for yourself whether much of your sorrow has not arisen from someone speaking negatively of you. As long as you set yourself up as a little god to which you must be loyal, there will always be those who will delight to offer affront to your idol. How then can you hope to have inward peace? Continue this fight through the years and the burden will become intolerable, and yet so many of us are carrying this burden continually, challenging every word spoken against us, smarting under every criticism, tossing sleepless in bed at night if another is preferred before us. Such a burden as this, says Jesus, is not necessary to bear if we would but come to him and lay it at his feet." We live in a world that makes us feel that we have to measure up, to impress, to be recognized and applauded. But this pressure doesn't just come from the world around us, it also comes from within. I mean, if any group of people should have been free from this burden, it's Jesus' disciples. Their leader and their example was Jesus himself, the perfect example of servant leadership, someone that they knew was 100% for them. And yet, even then, in this perfect work or ministry environment, Jesus' disciples allowed themselves to become burdened by questions of popularity and prestige. And so in Luke chapter 22, we read that a dispute arose among them as to which of the disciples should be considered the greatest. But Jesus said to them, "The kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors, but you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who is at the table? But I am among you as one who serves." Gordon MacDonald makes a distinction, a Christian writer, between those who are driven and those who are called. Driven people, MacDonald says, often project a bravado of confidence as they forge ahead with their achievement-oriented life plan, But often at the moment when it's least expected, adversities and obstructions conspire and there can be personal collapse. Called people, on the other hand, possess strength from within, a quality of perseverance and power that are impervious to the blows without, because they live before one audience that trumps all others, the audience of one. Called people know exactly who they are because they know whose they are. They are relieved of the burden of trying to manufacture a name for themselves because they already have an identity that no other prestige can beat. Beloved child of the living God. Nothing beats that. But in contrast, driven people, in an attempt to make a name for themselves, demonstrate an increasing inability to distinguish who they are from what they do. And so their life motto becomes, I achieve, therefore I am. But among the many problems associated with this approach to life is that if I think that I am what I do, what I achieve, then my self-worth will be judged on how well I feel I am doing, but how well I feel I am doing will inevitably be based on how well I feel I'm doing in comparison to others. But if that's the case, then I'm now in a position where my sense of self-worth has actually become inversely proportional to how well others around me are doing. And if that's the case, it becomes increasingly difficult to genuinely celebrate the success of others. To those of us, which is me, and probably most of you, who struggle with this burdensome disease of constant comparison, Jesus says, you must become as little children. For very little children do not compare, they just receive direct enjoyment from whatever they have without relating it to something else or someone else. It's only as they get older, they become older children, they become increasingly unable to enjoy what they have if another child has something bigger or can do something better. And it's not that this jealousy and envy just disappear when we become adults either. It's just that we become more adept at hiding it. But Jesus says, you must become little children and come to me and I will tell you who you are. I will call you to what you should do. And if you remember, it was the little children who loved coming to Jesus, and Jesus loved it when the little children came to him. So why not do that now? Come to Jesus as the beloved child of the living God that you are, and find rest for your weary souls. In your groups, why don't you spend time doing that individually, just coming to God and allow him to speak his words of truth and love over who you are in him. And together in your groups, why don't you reflect on that time and spend some time sharing the struggle that we all have and pray for each other in it together as well. Amen.
We won't be meeting in our venture communities now until October, as we enjoy a variety of guest speakers and give some space for those who serve us all year round. Join us at the Beaconsfield School for Summer Sundays. Keep in touch with the life of the church at our website, www.venturechurch.org.uk. That's the notices.